Hello, my lovies, and welcome back to another fun stream with another fab guest. Today I have, and I do hope I pronounce his name right and I'm not butchering it, which I'll probably do, but he'll tell me off in a second. Galatine from the amazing Talking Tube YouTube channel. Oh my God, this is hard to say. But yes, he's a friend in the Lord of the Ring community, and we met a while ago. And I really do like his content, and this is why, and his view on Tolkien and the lore. And this is why I invited him today to talk about an amazing topic. But enough of me blabbering on. Galathine, your stage.
All right, well, yeah, I am Galifine. My channel's Tolkien Tube. On it, I cover about a 50-50 ratio of news and lore, most of the news being about the Lord of the Rings on Prime upcoming TV show made by Amazon. And it's been a blast being a part of the Tolkien community for these 2 short months. But yeah.
Is it only 2 months? It literally feels.
Oh no,
that
sorry, I
you've
meant
been there.
more than 2 months, just like
Yeah.
too short, Yeah.
Too short, exactly. Yeah. But yes, as you said, you have content surrounding a lot of your content is about the upcoming show, and the upcoming show is about the Second Age. And this is what we'll talk about here. We will talk about, well, let's call it important realms of the elves. Everybody knows Helen likes the elves. We will never talk about dwarves here on this channel, people. I mean, you've seen how they slaughtered me recently. But yes, we will talk about important realms of the elves in the Second Age, because we were talking, Galfine and I have been talking about this a bit ahead of the stream, and I was like, but First Age, there were literally, and this is an important information, I think, because in the First Age there were literally so many elven realms, way more than we had in the Second and Third Age. We don't have that many even, but First Age, due to the seven sons of Fëanor, all of them, or sometimes 2 of them had literally a realm, or they took over a realm from somebody else, and so there were way more elven strongholds and realms than in the Second Age, but we decided to go for Second Age because I think that is the most interesting time regarding the series as well, and I think a lot of people want to prepare for the series. Would you agree? And regarding with their map knowledge?
Yeah, there's been a lot of interest, and that's part of why my channel is focused on the Amazon show, because, it's good for your YouTube channel to sort of ride on the tailcoat of a popular topic.
Yes. And it's, as I said, I love the Second Age. For me, the Second Age is more about Numenor than the elves, but I don't think we will just get Numenor. I mean, there have to be elves. There are so many important characters like Elrond, like Círdan, Galadriel, and they're all elves, and they want characters we know. They want characters people can identify with because they've heard of them at least, or they know them, like in the character of Elrond and Galadriel. So I think the elves are really important, as are their strongholds, and the strongholds of the Second Age in Middle-earth, they're mainly elven, because all the men, the important, yes, I mean, there is Arnor and Gondor, but still, I think the more importance lay, and especially with the wars going on in the elven realms, we will talk about.
Yep, for sure. I'd say probably more important than Numenor, and definitely more important than Lindon, even though Lindon is definitely very important, is Eregion, which is ruled by Celebrimbor or Galadriel, or Galadriel and then Celebrimbor. It's a bit of a mess, but that will probably be one of the main places we'll see.
Yeah. And because what happened, I mean, let's start maybe there, because I do think it is not just a very important elven stronghold, but what happened there will not only be important for the show, but this is important to the lore in general. Because, I mean, just going back, Eregion was founded circa 700, I think, beginning of the second age.
Yeah.
So it was not the first age stronghold. It was founded in the second age. And I think a lot of refugees, like in all the cities from Beleriand, which, spoiler, drowned at the end of the first age in the War of Wrath. So Middle Earth completely changed after the first age. And so let's talk about what happened there in the second age in Eregion. Like, let's go maybe through the history a little bit.
All right. So I'm not exactly sure on the date. Sometime after like the year 1000 of the
Dates
second
don't
age.
matter. Yeah, don't matter.
Well, Anatar was, of course, rejected from Lindon by Gil-galad and Elrond, and so he still wanted to corrupt the elves. So then he went to Eregion, where the Gwaith Imirdain, which were the craftsmen of Eregion, they were, you could say, young of spirit. They were, of course, very, very old elves, but they still wanted to learn a lot, and that's part of the reason why they accepted Anatar. Who was, of course, Sauron in disguise, and then they made the rings with them. And we all know what happened from that.
Yeah. Do you have the feeling, because you just said that they obviously didn't know, and I really believe that. I mean, nobody would have welcomed Sauron amongst their ranks, no elf. But do you think, I mean, who did they really believe? I mean, we don't have that much information from the book. What do you think? How will it be portrayed, especially in the show? Like, do they portray him as a Valar? Do they portray him as? I don't think he will be a man. Will he be like a messenger from the Valar? Will he portray himself as a Maiar sent by the Valar? What do you think is his backstory? Because nobody just trusts somebody coming from nowhere.
Yeah, well, I've always thought of Anatar as being essentially one of the Istari, which were the wizards, but sort of like the early concept of them. And of course, he wasn't actually sent by the Valar, but that's what he said. He said he was, and they didn't quite see through his guise in Lindon, although they did know something was wrong, which is another really interesting topic of. You know, if Elrond and Gil-galad knew that something was wrong, why didn't they chop his head off or attack him or whatever it was? So they didn't know he was Sauron, but they probably knew he wasn't what he claimed to be, which was a messenger of the Valar sent to be like the Lesser, not the Aragorn Lesser, but the Elfstone.
Yes, and especially even you mentioned the others, but Galadriel also. It is written, I even think, I'm not 100% sure, but that she suspects something. She doesn't trust him, and Galadriel is always spot on, you know, with her with her feelings about people. Just saying she was unfriends with Fëanor, you know, so she always had. She knew who to trust and who not to trust. And how did nobody, I mean, obviously, I mean, they later realized, but it is, the book states that Celebrimbor just really realized who he was when Sauron was in Mount Doom, speaking the words, forging his own ring, speaking the words in the black speech engraved in the ring, so the ring poem. He heard him kind of telepathically saying the words, and then he realized, oh my God. But it is, I wonder how they will do that, because I really do think, like you said, you know, in the beginning, everything was, hey, wow, we, you know, the Noldor were they like to learn, as you said, right? And this is same back in Valinor, because Morgoth did teach Fëanor, and he even claimed, you know, which probably not true, but he claimed he had part in Fëanor crafting the Silmarils, because he kind of, you know, gave him the power and the knowledge to create these jewels and to be this amazing craftsman, right? And I think he did the same. Sauron then later on another level did the same with the Gwaith Imirdain, like you said.
Yeah, And throughout Tolkien's works, we see that a lot of harm can be done through crafting things rather than just through plain destruction, like what Morgoth did. Because, Sauron, Anatar crafting the rings, Feanor, he did a lot of really bad things, messed up a whole lot of the early history of the world. And all that was done through crafting, which led to the destruction rather than just a Dark Lord saying, hey, I'm going to go burn this village down.
It's like you said, often it's not war, it's portrayed different. It's not just warfare, pure strength. The evil is hidden in disguise very often. And because you just said that, it just reminded me, because you said, crafting led to evil things. Just remember how in the First Age Beleriand fell, and why partly Beleriand fell. Because first of all, Thingol was dead. Because why did Thingol die? Because the dwarves killed him for the Nauglamir, for a necklace, right?
Yeah, yep.
I mean, yes, the sons of Fëanor then came and wanted the Silmaril, but that is part of this thing that was created by Thingol and the dwarves. So people, what is say no to jewelry. That should be the lesson here. Yes, but Eregion, what else do you want to see? Are you interested in that whole? You said before, Galadriel and Celeborn were there, right? And Celebrimbor is a relative of Galadriel, right? But then he is from the wrong side of town, basically. He is from Feanor's line. How do you think the relationship of these two, and then later on, obviously, when Celeborn comes into the game, are you excited for that? What do you think, what they will do with that?
Well, especially with Galadriel and Celebrimbor, there's just so many forms of canon.
Of course, yes.
Yeah. So I think they're going to end up mixing the forms of canon. So we will probably see Celebrimbor, I don't know, make the Alessar the Elfstone. And that's also the canon where he is in love with Galadriel, even though she's married to Celeborn. Because that would add, it's a classic romantic spin. It's a love triangle. And Galadriel, of course, doesn't love him back. She's married. So there's so many things they could do with that. And with Celeborn, I don't think he'll be too big of a character, but I think Galadriel...
You don't think? I think he'll be one of the... I want him to be, and I'm not biased by the Shadow of Mordor games, which they gave us at least more info, which is not lore, but I liked him portrayed there because he got a face and a voice, I never had that. I mean, there are lots of pictures of him, but I kind of liked to see him because I always wondered about this character, because he was the forger of the 3 elven rings and all the other rings. He's so important.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was talking about Celeborn. I don't know if I accidentally said Celebrimbor. Celebrimbor, definitely.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe you said. I
don't know. Maybe I misspoke. I'm sorry. But yeah, Celebrimbor, indeed. And I played Shadow of War. I did not play Shadow of Mordor, and I thought it was a really great game. It really butchered the canon, but I mean, still, it was a great game.
It was.
So it would be great to see Celebrimbor. We have to see him. So I think in Eregion, the big 3 elves that we're going to end up seeing are Celeborn, Galadriel, and Celebrimbor.
Yes.
And I mean, Anatar, but you can't really count him as an elf, of course.
No. And also the Gwaith y Myrdain, I'm really interested because I think in Numenor they can portray, the guild of the shipping guild, because there was a very similar guild, but they were just interested in colonization of Middle Earth and shipping, building ships, and later on it all goes a bit downhill, and they became, which I always say from teachers to masters, kind of. But they had a guild as well. And the dwarves had a guild, like I really want this interaction of these guilds, because it is just in real life, we had these guilds, medieval, started in medieval times as well. So I really want to see that, and them interacting with each other. Do they swear an oath to get that? I think that is a really cool and interesting topic.
Yeah, there's so much lore that they can put into the show. And really something that I've been thinking of is, how deep are they actually going to go? Are they going to really like deeply explain the Valar, the Maiar? They probably should explain that pretty well if they're going to have the Blue Wizards, which, for anyone who doesn't know, there were some of the wizards, and they came in the Third Age in some forms of canon, while in others they came in the Second Age. What was it? I think the year 1000 or 1600. One of the two.
Yeah, not at the beginning, not right at the beginning, but yes. I do think the Blue Wizards will come, because, hear me out, I know this will be very controversial, but we don't have Gandalf in the Second Age. And I do think you need this. Yes, you have Sauron, but I think you need a counterpart to Sauron's magic. And the elves, and we'll talk about this a bit later when we talk about Lorien and the magic Galadriel uses for Lorien, which she was taught by Melian, but more on that later. But we don't have a counterpart to Sauron's magic. So I would really like to see a counterpart, and that counterpart was Gandalf. Gandalf was the counterpart to the Witch King, to the Nazgul, and to Sauron, and to Saruman. You had all these characters and all this magic in the world. Now you don't have that in the show, so I really do think they will bring the Blue Wizards.
Yeah, and from a factual basis, there is, I don't know, I wouldn't quite call it evidence, but strong rumor that they will be in the show. I think the OneRing.net released something, or not quite released, but I think one of their guests mentioned it about Sir Lenny Henry being a Blue Wizard, but I think later that was sort of disproved. So,
which I would love. Oh my god.
Yeah, there were a lot of mixed feelings about that in my comment section. I don't really know much about him. I'm from America, so I don't know much about the UK comedians. But I think the Blue Wizards would be a great pair of people to put in. Or if they did not have the Blue Wizards in there, they could also have Galadriel be the counterpart to Anatar, because we know that she sort of became the protagonist of the story of Anatar in a fashion. And of course, there were sort of many heroes, but she was definitely one of them. And of course, she's, like the wisest elf of pretty much all the Second Age and pretty much all time.
The wisest in general. Tolkien even says that she is second to Feanor, who was the greatest elf that ever was and ever will be. But she was second to him, but she was wiser than him. Tolkien even says that. But I know what you're saying, but Galadriel in the movies later, and even in the books, she's not portrayed as a real counterpart to power-wise. She doesn't match his powers. And even the other Istari coming to Middle Earth, not for like Gandalf actually was not allowed, or we don't know why did Gandalf never use his full power, because in rank and in status he was similar to Sauron, right? But he never used that power. He was more there, to guide the others to fulfill their quest. And he interacted with the magic beings, like with the Witch King and everything. But the Witch King is a former mortal, So you often felt that that Gandalf and the Witch King, when they battled, that it was an even matched battle. But Gandalf should be above him, right?
Like if you've read Lord of the Rings, or maybe not necessarily the Lord of the Rings, I don't know if they say that Gandalf, who Gandalf is as a wizard,
Mhm.
and that the wizards are the Maiar, which are
Yeah.
essentially angels. I don't know if they say
Yeah.
that in the Lord of the Rings. Definitely say that in the chapter about the Istari and the Unfinished
Yes.
Tales.
Yeah.
But if you've read any of that, it really does change your mind when you read through The Return of the King or watch the movies, because
Mhm.
it's essentially a lowercase g god of Middle Earth, huge, immense power. He made Arda, not alone, but he had a hand in it, and he's just going up against a single Numenorian corrupted, just a corrupted Numenorian, and there's
Yeah.
such a huge difference of power.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I do think he was not allowed, or he didn't use his full might and full power he actually had, because that was not his role in this
Yeah,
whole plot, like, otherwise Eru the god, he could just send him to fight Sauron, right? But that was not what's supposed to happen. The small folk, the hobbits and their friends, they were supposed, to save the world and save the day, basically. So yeah, so this is why, I think Galadriel, yes, she's very powerful, and she learned, actually, I think she is so powerful because she learned from another angel, as you said, from another Maiar, from Melian. And when she was in the First Age, when she arrived in Middle Earth from Aman, because Galadriel is also so powerful because she was born in the realm of Aman, and she has seen the light of the two trees. And those elves who saw the light and grew up there and were born there, just like Glorfindel, they have a certain kind of, how would you describe it, like power, light in themselves.
yeah, a lot of power. I'd say power, light, and if they've seen the trees of
Yeah.
Valinor, that's pretty much a pretty big game changer if they're like
Yes.
Glorfindel.
Yeah.
And back to, if we're circling back to
Mhm.
Gandalf, I'd say personally, I think the reason he wasn't allowed to use all of his power is because uh, they didn't want him to become like Saruman, because the
Yes.
Maiar could still be corrupted. I mean, after all, Sauron,
Mhm.
he was Maiar and
Yeah.
he got corrupted.
Yeah.
And so if he had all the power like Sauron did, then he could possibly be corrupted by Sauron, if not take his
Mhm.
place, which I think it's more likely that he would have ended up taking Sauron's place.
You think so?
Yeah, like if he had taken the ring, I think he definitely would have, because
If he'd taken
he
the
would have
ring.
been.
Okay, now. Okay, oh, yeah. Yes.
Yeah, if he had taken the ring, or if I don't think there's many other ways he could have been corrupted, but
Mm, he would. I.
he was definitely of more noble spirit than Saruman. So, but yeah,
Yeah.
if he got the ring,
Mm,
just the ring,
mm,
he would have been corrupted and he would have become the new
yeah.
Sauron.
Yeah.
But if he was less noble, if he was a less noble Maiar, if he was more like Saruman,
Mhm,
like we know in the Third Age, he went evil pretty much, and he
mhm,
started looking for the ring, but he
mhm.
was already evil. So if he had all of his
Was, yeah.
power, then Middle Earth would have probably fallen,
Yeah.
to be rescued by the Valar, I'm sure later, but
Mhm.
that would have been pretty bad.
Yeah. I do think, him and Galadriel and all those people who kind of tested themselves, actually, especially Galadriel, she tested herself with a ring. They wouldn't, I mean, their reasons and their for taking the ring would be complete different reasons, right?
Mhm.
Galadriel would take it to preserve nature and to preserve her kingdom and to actually, in the beginning, wanted to do good. But this is how I always imagined and what would happen to Lorien, and we'll come to Lorien because another important realm we will talk about, and stronghold. If she wants to preserve it, let's see, there are lots of trees, so she needs lots of water, so she'll drain rivers, and then what happens. This is literally what happened in real life, in our reality. Like, if you drain rivers, if you take too much water from areas to water your plants, your plantations, your whatever, other regions dry out, and then animals die and people, like all the. I think her reasons for taking the ring would be very, very very different from Saruman. Like you said, Saruman was said to be, even back in Aman, he was jealous. He didn't want Gandalf to come. He didn't want Radagast because he didn't think much about Radagast, but he didn't want Gandalf to come. And he was actually pissed. I can say that here on my channel. He was pissed that Gandalf came, and he was always jealous of him and his snatches. And so he had a very different personality from the beginning on. Gandalf didn't. But if Gandalf would have taken the ring,
I think he would have taken the ring, and of course, part of Gandalf's character is that he would never have taken the ring. I mean,
No.
he was tempted to.
Yeah.
Tom Bombadil took it, but he was unaffected by it. But I think if Gandalf ended up taking the ring, he would have used it to end Sauron, because that was his purpose there, and it was Radagast and Blue Wizard and Saruman's purpose. But he was the only person who really stuck to that purpose. So I think he would have used it for good, but fallen to evil.
Yeah. And that is not how the story was planned by God, right? Who kind of wrote the framework. This is always how I see it. I think Eru wrote the framework to all of this, but he didn't write every character and every action of every character. It wasn't Gandalf's deed to do to destroy the ring and to get the ring and to take the ring and to destroy Sauron himself. Good. So we covered Eregion, and a very important region. And as you said, I think in the show it will be heavily featured and portrayed.
Absolutely.
And for me, always, because I looked at all the kingdoms of the second age of the elves. So there is Lindon with Mithlond, very important. We'll talk about that now. Then there is Rivendell, which was founded a little bit later, but also still in the second age. So that is the home of Elrond. And then we have Lothlorien, which wasn't founded by Galadriel by any means. It was an older kingdom, but it was taken over by Celeborn and Galadriel. And then there was the Woodland realm. So all of these, are there any more, would you say? Not really.
Well, wait, did you already see the Elves of Mirkwood?
Yes, that Woodland realm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sorry. I didn't hear that.
Mirkwood, yes.
So, I think there's definitely not that many Elven kingdoms during the Second Age. And really, the main ones are just Lindon and Eregion. And, a Woodland realm, which is, in Mirkwood, which later went to Thranduil and, Amroth and Amdir, all of that stuff.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
I'm sorry, not Amroth and Amdir. That's Lorien.
Yes, that's Lorien. Yes.
Yeah.
It was always Thranduil's dad and him who were refugees from Doriath. And like we said, Doriath drowned at the end of the First Age, and some of the refugees founded, which was Thranduil's dad, Orofer.
Yep, that's him.
Orofer. I don't know, people.
You roll the R, but I don't know what in the world you're supposed to do with the PH sound.
Exactly. We will call Chris. Chris will know and tell us. Chris is our go-to person for pronunciation. So Orofer, Thranduil's dad, he founded. They were both from Doriath, and they were even. I think Thranduil is even born in Doriath. And just a little side information for the people who watch The Hobbit. Do you know why they portrayed this weird plot twist of the dwarves showing that white necklace, the white gems of Lasgallen or whatever? I mean, we just talked about it, but do you know the reference for the dwarven hate of the elves? What?
Yeah, well, in movies, right? You're talking about that? Yeah, well, wouldn't that be part of the Nauglamir?
Yes. Yeah, I think that is the reference to the Nauglamir, because they couldn't talk about it because that's Silmarillion content. But I think that was a nod to, and they needed to show, in a way, why do actually dwarves, because this is pre-Lord of the Ring, right? And Legolas and Gimli, and we learned later in the Lord of the Rings, dwarves and elves hate each other, but why? So when you have a prequel to the Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, they wanted to explain a little bit of that hate, which was an ancient hate, actually. But yes, Woodland Realm. So Orafa, refugee of Doriath, and a Sindar elf. They founded the kingdom. And I find that, I mean, it is not really, I mean, the Hobbit is not really canon for me, not the Hobbit movie. And in the book The Hobbit, there's not that much information. I mean, they had a party in the woods.
And I think part of that's because, when it was, I don't think when it was first published, but some of the first drafts were, I don't think Gandalf was even in it. There was a wizard, I'm pretty sure, just not Gandalf. And, it wasn't part of the Lord of the Rings or the Middle Earth tale at all. So I think that's part of the reason why it doesn't have much canon.
No, it wasn't even Thranduil. He was just called the king, the Elven King. I think that he didn't even have a name or anything in the book.
Oh, and in the movies, there's the, he's got like scars on his face from the dragons. That's another interesting thing they threw in there.
Yeah.
Not precisely sure what that's a reference to. I mean, obviously the dragons. I don't know if it's
because
could be in Calagon or anything.
Yeah, but I don't. Yes, but I don't think Thranduil is that old, actually.
Yeah, he's not. He was, I think, born in the Second Age. But yeah, I don't know. Can't really be a reference to any of the dragons. Although it definitely is. But I think that's probably just completely made up. If he was a dwarf, it would make sense because of the cold drakes in the north. Sort of near the lonely mountains.
Maybe that, exactly. But we know that Doriath never took part in the First Age War. So Orofer could have, time-wise, and I think Thranduil must have been born in the First Age because he was born in Doriath and that fell at the end of the First Age. But Orofer, was definitely alive due the Battle of Unnumbered Tears, where the dragons came out, Glaurung and the whole brood and everything. They were alive during that time, but they didn't partake. Thingol didn't send anybody to aid the free people and the other elves and the dwarves. So it's a word reference. I think, again, this just wants to bring in lore about these things, that they fought dragons before, and they all kind of combine that in the person of poor Thranduil. Which, I'm okay with. I don't really mind that much. I don't even mind Tauriel.
I wasn't a fan of Tauriel, and I think they did a good job portraying how the dwarves and elves didn't like each other, but I think in some instances they definitely went too far. Like, my topic for Tolkien Reading Day, for those of you who don't know, is on Bilbo. That'll be coming out soon. I'm not sure when this video is going to be published. But yeah, and by the way, be sure to watch that playlist. It should be coming out soon. But back to what I was saying. I think they definitely they were too harsh with the dwarves and elves relationship. Like in The Hobbit, in the book, Thorin willingly shows Elrond his map, and Elrond looks at the runes. Whereas in the movie, I think Thorin is really resisting Elrond, and the dwarves are definitely very, very rude at Rivendell. And they're definitely a bit coarse, but they're not that rude,
No. The portrayal of the dwarves, especially in The Hobbit, is, well, yeah,
not that good, not the best.
No.
And
I mean, they were either used for comic relief, which sometimes is nice. I kind of like dad jokes, so sometimes it's okay. But
I found that there were three main kinds of elves. There was the really stoic, sort of haughty Thorin, and I think Thorin was portrayed pretty accurately relative to how some of the other characters were. Not perfect, and there's a couple of things that I really didn't like, but still pretty good. And then there's also the goofy dwarves, as you mentioned, like I don't know, Oin, Gloin, Dory, most of the side dwarves who, no one really
Side
knows the
dwarf,
name
I like that.
of. The
Side
one in the
dwarves.
beginning with the giant nose who mines the Arkenstone. And then there's the love triangle, dwarves, Feely and Keely. God forbid we ever see another one of those ever again in cinema.
Never, like not ever. Oh my God, who was that? Oh, Corey Olsen. Do you know Corey Olsen, like the Tolkien professor?
Oh, yeah.
He
Yeah.
told Dan and I that one game developer from Lotro, Lord of the Ring Online, that one of the storylines apparently was that an elf would fall in love with a Balrog. That was supposed to be one of the plot lines. And I was like, what? Why? No. Why? No.
Oof. Yeah, oof, that's pretty bad. See, Shadow of War and Shadow of Mordor, they butchered the canon, but they did not have anything that bad. There might
I
have
mean,
been like a referenced Shelob and Anatar thing, which doesn't make much sense, but I mean,
but I'm
not that
totally
bad.
fine with Shelob. Like, sexy Shelob was a thing, people. Come on.
I don't know. I'm a skeptic of any sexy Lord of the Rings characters that weren't intended to be.
What? Hot Sauron was intended to be hot. Come on.
Oh,
That was
I don't
part.
know.
I know. That's part of his
Fair
deal.
form, but I don't know. I don't. I mean, yeah, he'll have to be a good looking dude. I'm just gonna leave it at that. But I don't think there should be any, like seducing Galadriel or.
No,
Yeah.
and seduction is not meant
Yeah.
as sexual seduction.
Yeah, that's something that people misunderstand a lot, especially artists who might
Yeah.
want to think of it that way.
No.
Like, with Sauron seducing Morgoth, they're gods. They're not lustful and petty like humans. And of course they
Although
were lustful,
Morgoth,
but after more like power rather than sexual things.
yes, although Morgoth, and that is one of the only references Tolkien gave us, Morgoth really had the hots for Luthien when she danced in
That
front
is
of him.
true. That is true.
And I mean, that was very, I think that is like a biblical reference with the dance of the seven veils. So that was very similar how it was portrayed. And that was, but no, I know what you mean. Like all these artists portray, like, no, that's not what the text says. And seduction
Yeah.
is another form of seduction. Yeah, good. But let's go back to, I love where this is going, but let's go back to Elven Strongholds. And this is always, welcome to my channel and my stream. This is what always happens. Getting sidetracked. But yes, Woodland Realm. So a very important realm. And why I mentioned all these realms, did you notice anything? And I mentioned the first age, right? So I will try to incorporate here somewhere a map. And if you look at the map and look at all these realms we're talking about, and if you look at the first age, what is this all about? This is Tolkien was a warrior. Tolkien was a soldier. He knew battle tactics. In some of his books, like The Fall of Gondolin and other books where the battles are a bit more fleshed out, you can clearly see this man knows what he's talking about. There is a lot of tactical information of warfare in there. And I do think the description of and the places, the areas where these elven strongholds are, they are important. And would you agree that they
Yeah.
are important for one
I would
reason?
I
To
would definitely agree. Like with Rivendell, pretty much the not necessarily just the single purpose, but a big purpose of Rivendell was preventing Sauron from taking Lindon. And it definitely served in that purpose. In Numenor as well, their stronghold didn't really come under attack except for by deceit. But they also played a big role. And there's also a lot of real world inspiration when it comes to Tolkien. I remember, I'm not precisely sure which battle it was. It was several hundred years ago. I think it might have been the Battle of Rhodes, which served as sort of an inspiration for the Battle of Helm's Deep. And I thought that
Oh,
was interesting because Tolkien really, he was a warrior, he was a soldier in World War One, and he did know about tactics, and he knew about medieval tactics too.
yes,
I'd assume, because he wrote about it for sure. Um, so yeah, that's really interesting, and we should, in the context of the show, we should definitely see some of that. We should see strategy and plotting because that's a lot of the story. Like Sauron takes Eriador, and
yeah.
then in the Battle of the Gwathlo, he is absolutely beaten, partially because of the Numenoreans. And there's so many factors that come into play, and we should see all of that.
Yeah, and you have a great tactician and a great warrior with Gil-galad. I do think he will be portrayed as that because I think different characters stand for different things. Like Elrond, yes, he probably was a great warrior, first of all, because he lived with Gil-galad, and I think he learned from him as well. But he was also raised by the sons of Feanor, right? By two of the sons,
Hmm.
and he saw war happening. But I think Elrond doesn't stand for being a warrior. Elrond stands for, the memory of the people. He was basically the library of Middle Earth. He was very wise, and this is what. Yeah, it was like the memory and the conscience, and the knowledge of the world and preservation of that. Portrayed in when he reads the maps, for example. No one else in Middle Earth, or not many people, could do that. So
Yep.
Rivendell kind of stands for that. But I do think Gil-galad, Lyndon, is very much the warrior part, the warfaring part, the what is left basically of the Noldorian princes that came to Middle Earth for one purpose, to destroy Morgoth, and capture Morgoth. Um, and I think Gil-galad will be that warrior part of, and the tactics and the battle planning and all that. I would say, because maybe the Numenorians as well, obviously the Numenorians as well,
Yeah.
but I think it will be him. Would you agree? Because Galadriel, she has another purpose. Celeborn, we don't know, and I don't think Thranduil. Do you think the Woodland Realm
I
will
think if
pass?
any elven regions are going to sort of be blown over, it's definitely Lorien, which Lothlorien is the more popular name for it, and also the Woodland Realm, the Elves of Mirkwood, ruled by at that time Orifer. And I think they're just typically less popular. They're less important in the canon. They're still very important, and things would have gone pretty badly without them. But typically they're a little bit less important, especially when compared to like Eregion, where if you take out Eregion, you don't have the Second Age. You've just
Yeah,
got, I don't know, an extension of the Third Age or the first. Of course, the first, of course, has a very definite end. But
yeah,
without a Region, it's just a very boring age. And if you take out
yeah,
Numenor, then it's boring and there's not much that you can say about it. Same goes for Linden.
yeah.
So, yeah, I think Gil-galad probably will be one of the main
Hmm.
strategists. And of course, Celebrimbor can't be. Galadriel, I think she would be a great strategist. She is incredibly wise, but I just don't think that's the role that she takes. She
No,
takes sort of, um, and we disagree on this a little bit, but the anti-Sauron. She opposes Anatar in some ways,
yeah,
and I think she's in Region and in Lorien too, at least in some forms of canon during the Second Age.
yeah,
And so I definitely think that Gil-galad, sorry, I always mess up on that pronunciation, but I think he will probably be the biggest strategist. And Elrond, I mean, he has a lot of strategy too, but again, in the context of the show, that would probably be a lot later in the series.
yeah. I agree. Yes. And him, like, because we don't know, how far, around what time. I still do think the drowning of Numenor will play. No, obviously not in the first season. Oh my god, are you still here?
Oh yeah, sorry.
Good.
Yes.
Sorry. Now's the time to bring it up. Yeah, we're very quiet. Yes. So I do, because what we know later on is in Rivendell, Rivendell fosters the heirs of Elendil. But that will, play a role later on. That's not season 1, season
Yeah.
2. That would be about I would assume the forging of the rings. It should start around that, because that just is middle of the second age. That's
Yeah.
not second age is pretty
And
long.
that's another really good question is, how many, I think we're going to have about 5 seasons, but what's going to be in each season? Because I think it wouldn't be too hard to do it in just 2 or 3 seasons. And, each season should have maybe not a definite end, but, it's got to have some sense of finality with maybe a really good hook.
Some
Cliffhanger.
resolution to
Yeah, it
topic.
needs to have some resolution. But how do you find 5 different little resolutions with unending powerful resolution, which could be like, I don't know, the very end when Sauron is killed, in the end of the Second Age, that is. And
So you agree that
Lovely to be
that
one.
will be the end. Elendil and the battle of the last alliance basically is the end, right? Of the
Either that or probably the sinking of Numenor when Sauron dies for the first time. I think the sinking of Numenor is going to be in the end of one season. It's going to be the season finale. Probably, I don't know, season 4, maybe 3. And they're also going to have to make up a ton of canon. Maybe we'll see a new Elven Kingdom. I don't think it would be a very wise decision, but we'll definitely see some new elves. Maybe some new smaller elf settlements. You never know.
Mhm. Talking about size of these cities, of these elven strongholds we were talking about. So we have the woodland realm, we have Lorien or Lothlorien, we have Rivendell, we have Eregion as region, and we have Linden with Mithlond with the Grey Havens. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bigger elven strongholds
Yeah.
surrounding basically Mordor. To the southeast, there's Gondor as well. Um, and then you basically have if you look at the map, and then you have kind of, not really, really, but you kind of have a circle, right? What do you
Yeah.
think the second age? Because a lot of elves die in the first age, like a lot. Beleriand falls, Doriath falls, a lot of kingdoms fall in the first age. A lot of elves are no longer around. Are the elves still the main players in Middle Earth? Because Numenor is an island. Numenor, I think, at the end of the Second Age, just before the drowning, Numenor is millions. Numenor's armada is said to be the biggest armada anyone has ever seen, and that's just ships, right? Um,
Yeah.
so so the population, I think I made a video about that. The population of Numenor were a few millions, 20 millions, whatever, few millions. What do you think the elves will be in the second age? What is the biggest? Is Rivendell? Because Rivendell is not really big. It's not.
Well, I
Um,
think if you're looking at it from the perspective of which region, which Elven Stronghold or Kingdom is going to be the most popular, I think you have to look at it on a more specific level. Like, what does Lorien have to offer? And what does Eregion, like which characters? And in that scenario, I think Eregion is going to be the place we see most, and it's going to be the most pivotal as well.
I
And
think
of
the
course,
biggest should be Linden.
sorry, what?
Linden should be the biggest. Wouldn't you agree with Gil-galad? He's the
But
last High King.
I
That
think
should.
Linden will probably be the second biggest because with Eregion, you've got the forging of the rings, you've got the deception of Anatar, and in Linden, you do have a little bit of that where Anatar, tried to deceive gil-galad and Elrond, but he failed, and then he went to Eregion. So I don't think the majority of the show will take place in Linden because it's got to be all about the rings of power. We know that much about the show.
Okay. So misunderstanding. I meant size-wise, population-wise.
Oh, okay. Oh, then Linden. Yes, I think Linden would be the biggest because
Yes. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
because Eregion sort of splintered off from Linden. And yeah, Linden, it's sort of what remains of Beleriand after the first age. So yeah, I agree with you then.
I was sorry. I completely agree with what you said about where will it take place the most. No, I meant population because that is important because
Mhm.
we learn, later on the elves dwindle, the elves leave the world. This will be now in the third age, especially after the destruction of the ring. This will be the time of men, right? So elves
Yeah.
more and more leave Middle Earth. But in the second age, there were still many elven strongholds. And, it's so sad in the third age when you read about it, when like Elrond and they all leave Middle Earth and they go to the Undying Lands. And like when Luthien, when Arwen, hmm, when Arwen goes to die, she goes back to Rivendell, and because Aragorn is
Yeah.
dead, and there's no one, and it's empty, and this is so sad. And even Celeborn leaves Lorien. Apparently, after a while, he still stays back, and I think he goes to Rivendell to live with the twins, with Elrond's twins, for a while. But then he also leaves, like all these elven kingdoms gone. And
Yeah, and then of course, there's the afterlife, which we probably shouldn't get into because that's a whole topic on its own, very confusing
for
sometimes.
that another time,
But
yeah.
you know, there's sort of like a piece in the end which sort of resembled Tolkien's own belief of purgatory and stuff like that. Less so for the elves because they're bound to Arda, but in the end, I think there is peace. Arwen found it, and all pretty much all the characters, like Frodo and Sam got to go to the Undying Lands as well. But I mean, even they eventually died there and then left the world. But I think it's hard to read that, especially like when you're done reading the Return of the King again. It can be really sad, but then if you think about it, they all went on to better places.
Yeah, it's a sad ending, but it's a meaningful
Yeah,
purpose. And for yes, obviously, no, you're right. Yeah, it's just about the strength of the Eld in the Second Age. I'm just interested how powerful were they actually, because we know the elves asked Numenor to help them in their fight with Sauron because they knew they couldn't withstand him alone. And before that, yes, the Union of Medros and all the other times they were aided by humans, sometimes even by dwarves, like in the Nirnaeth and Nodiad, in the Battle of the Unnumbered Tears. They were the dwarves of Belegost. So they were aided sometimes, but during a lot of times in the First Age, it was just elves fighting Morgoth. In the Second Age, they had to ask Numenor to help them. Do you think men are already more powerful in the Second Age?
that's a hard question to answer. We do know for sure that the elves are not at their most powerful, for sure. And um, that's hard to say because Numenor, it's incredibly powerful. It's the most powerful the kingdoms of men will ever be because they've still got they haven't dwindled yet. It's probably not the greatest in population the race of men will ever be, but it's the strongest it'll ever be. It's the tallest, the farthest seeing, the wisest, the most knowledgeable in lore they'll ever be. So I think it's a close race. I think we know, of course, without the Numenorians, Eriador would have stayed under Anatar or Sauron's control, I should
Yeah.
say, because he dropped his guys by that time. Lindon would have been captured for sure. Rivendell, pretty much all of Middle Earth, and then the Valar would have had to intervene. Um, so I think that's really hard to answer. I'd say it's very close, and if Numenor really wanted to, they could probably destroy Lindon and maybe Eregion because they were essentially all the elves in Beleriand, but scattered, whereas Numenor was still kept whole.
They
So
were one.
I think in the
Yeah.
first age, late First Age, maybe, then Numenor would have been able to. Then the elves would have probably won. But I think in the Second Age, Numenor probably would have been able to beat, the elves of Lindon. But then there's also the question of, and of course this is maybe getting a little bit off topic, but it would be really hard for them to go to like Mirkwood from where they were. That's pretty much half the distance, if not a little bit more, of all of Arda. And of course,
exactly.
yeah.
No, definitely. No, I would completely agree. And this is, this mistake the men later made by dividing their power by founding Arnor and Gondor. And then even Arnor got split up in 3 different kingdoms or parts. So they even lost more power. So that was, well, actually a mistake. It was tactically like having a power there in the north, where the Witch King was basically, and having a power farther south, Gondor, closer to Mordor. It makes sense in a way. But then, you're just half of, and I mean, it was just 9 ships that escaped the downfall of Numenor in the beginning. I mean, they then mingled with their colonies. It wasn't that just 9 ships were still alive. They founded years and years ago, centuries ago, colonies in Middle Earth. So they came, like Londdaer, and there were other Numenorian ports they founded, not elven ports, because we know the Numenorians and the elves, they used Mithlond, I think a lot of trade or whatever from Numenor to the elven realms happened in Mithlond. And yeah, so whatever.
Yeah, I agree with all that.
And another, let's go a little bit back to Gil-galad, because I have a video about him, a similar video here. I can link that if I don't forget it, with Dan from Voice of Geekdom, and we talked about Gil-galad because I think he's very underrated. There's not much known about him, but then there is actually, we know quite a bit about him, and I think he will be portrayed in the show. And Lindon is very interesting because I told you about, the problem with a lot of these refugees came from Beleriand, and they were Sindar, aka Teleri. So they then come to a kingdom ruled by Noldorian princes. What did the Noldor do? They burned and killed Teleri, kinslaying. And there are very often conflicts. And I do wonder, like, for example, Galadriel, right? Galadriel comes to Lothlorien, and she takes over as, she doesn't even take the kingship because they had a king before. She is just the lady, and maybe that is a symbol for something. She's just a lady of there. She doesn't call herself queen, and she is part Teleri as well. She's not full Noldor, so she has Teleri ancestry as well. This is why Thingol liked her and accepted her. But other, like Lindon, had a problem of rivalry. So there were people escaping the fall of Beleriand and Doriath, and they were escaping to Lindon. And so there were 2 parts, Harlinden and Forlinden. Is that correct? Is that
Yep,
wrong?
and Harlingen in the Second Age at least was ruled by Elrond, the vice regent of Gil-galad at the
And
time.
I think Celeborn even later.
Yeah. Wait. Yeah. Sorry. My bad. I think it was Celeborn who ruled Harlingen. I don't know. One of the two. I've got that a little bit muddled in my head.
Because he was a refugee of Beleriand, of Doriath. He was a close kin to Thingol.
Yeah.
They had to make him that because Galadriel married him. His first version was not that. But marry a nobody, so he became related to the king of Doriath. But yes, I think it was Celeborn, because that would make sense, because he ruled over the Sindar.
Yeah. You're right. You're definitely right. For everyone on the audience, I messed up. Don't forget about what I said.
Seriously, I do that all the time. I don't have any tabs open. I have like a few notes here. That's it. People in the chat will call you out because they are in the comment section, because they're cleverer than we are. But you know what? We just keep talking. No, so Harlindon, like we said, Cinder, and then the other part, I think Harlindon was in the south and Forlindon in the north, or the other way
Yep.
around.
I've actually got a map of Middle Earth right by me. And Harlingen is in the southern area.
And Forlindon was Noldor mainly. And
Yep.
so it's interesting because, Gil-galad, well, again, his lineage is also changed like 1,000 times. But he also, and I do think they identify as Noldor because he was the last High King of the Noldor, and it's always your paternal side that gives you the main what house or what line or what clan you identify with. So this is
Yeah.
why Galadriel was counted amongst Noldor as well, although she had less Noldor blood in her than other, Um, and many other elves. But when your father and his father's father was an Noldor, then you're counted amongst the Noldor as well. But yes,
And
so
yeah, and back to Galadriel, she's going to be, of course, in the context of the show. I might be returning to the show too much, but she'll
I
be
love
she'll be a biggie that we're going to see, and hopefully we get to see some of the heritage as well, because a lot of the elves, especially the rulers, as is true in the real world, typically the rulers have, and more so in the medieval world rather than currently. But usually the rulers have really, really impressive heritage. Maybe not so much, and when they don't have impressive heritage, that in and of itself is kind of impressive that they came to rule without that heritage.
but then they're great warriors, or
Yeah,
they have something about
and
them.
there's something that makes them unique, and it's not that, but it sort of still puts a unique spin on their character,
Oh,
which I think
definitely.
is really interesting.
Yeah. And in the end, they are all these main characters, except, and this is really cool, and this is why I would love to see Orofa, although he could be related to Celeborn, because Orofa also was said to be Thranduil's dad, kin of Thingol, so we don't know. But all the others are basically cousins and very, very close related to each other. Like Galadriel is the mother of Elrond's wife and stuff, and they
Hmm.
are even related. So yeah. That makes the story even more interesting because it's like in the Children of Hurin and all that. It's well, actually, especially due to this Feanor curse and the curse of the Noldor. This is really which still plays a big part in the Second Age, even though the Silmarils are gone and all that. But still, this curse still plays a
Yeah,
role. And
and in the Second Age and in the Third Age, of course, we see the pride of Galadriel and how, she's got the ban on her. And
yeah,
again, in the show, I think that's something that we're going to see. And
yeah,
hopefully we'll also see her become less and less prideful as we do in the canon, because the elves are very old, very, very old, especially by the standards of humans. And they still do mature, though. Like
yeah,
Elrond became more wise in the Third Age. I'm sure Galadriel did as well. Even though Tolkien doesn't specifically state that often, they do become more wise and they do learn and they do become more knowledgeable, especially in the standards of their kin, because typically, the more elves there are, and then as time goes on, there become less and less elves, and they typically become less knowledgeable. But then there's those like Círdan, the oldest elf ever, was so old he had a beard, and he knew
yeah.
he knew a lot of stuff, especially with the standards of his kin, who probably knew a whole lot less stuff than he did because
Yeah.
he's as old as dirt.
He could. Do you agree? Do you think Círdan was born in Cuivennen? Was he one of the OG elves?
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people support that theory, and I do as well. I think so, and I don't see a reason why he couldn't be. I think
Mm,
it makes sense, and
yeah,
Tolkien. I don't think he does say exactly when he was born, but we do know he was one of the first elves, even if he wasn't, pretty much the first, but or one of the first, but he's an early elf either way.
Next to the three kings of the three
Mm-hmm.
clans, he was definitely born in. We know that he was born in Middle-earth and not a man later, so he must be one of the first ones. Was he an OG though, born in Quiven? I would love that because it connects you to the beginnings of the elves,
Yeah.
and it's cool to have one of these characters because the first elves to be awoken, they literally disappear. I think Tatye and Enel and all these. And they were then replaced by the three kings, by Fingon, and oh my god, that's really late. And well, Fëanor's dad, and by Thingol and Olwe, and what was the Vanya king? I always forget his name. Finwë. So those three OG kings
Yeah.
replace then all of a sudden the OG elves that did awake. So Círdan would be, because he will play a role, and it would be cool to reference, because if you're bringing Círdan, you could reference, the birth mythology of the elves or
And
the
that's something I find interesting because, like with the Eagles, in The
Mhm.
Hobbit and mostly in The Lord of the Rings, and I'm talking about the movies here, they introduced a little bit of lore. They just introduced the Eagles. They did absolutely no explaining about what the Eagles were, who sent them, who made them. They don't even really delve into the gods of Middle Earth, the Valar, and the Maiar, and just, the Ainu, Einar. And so it opens up a whole lot of plot holes when you sort of just explain something. So if you explain that Círdan's really old, people are going to ask how old. Or if you explain that Anatar is a Maiar and he came into the world and he was corrupted by Morgoth, and you're going to say, hey, where's all the other Maiar? Why aren't there more? And, it opens up a whole lot of questions. So they do have to be careful with the show, how many things they bring in if they don't have the time to explain all those perfectly. Because like
Yes.
with the Eagles, they didn't explain why the Eagles weren't able to bring the Fellowship all the way to Mordor.
Yeah, but that were just three movies. Here you have hours and hours. I mean, you have a lot to cover as well.
5 seasons. So hopefully, you're right. Yeah, hopefully they will have all the time in the world to explain. But
But
then
you know
again,
what?
like
Yeah.
when it comes to the Valar, that's incredibly hard to show. Like I don't
Mm,
I don't know of a single movie that was able to show gods well,
yeah.
and that's what the Valar were. And again, Anatar was a god, but he was incarnate and he looked like an elf, so he's just going to look like a really pretty elf or sexy elf, either one. Um, but yeah, it'll be really hard to show some of this stuff without explaining the gods. But if they do explain the gods, that's going to be a little bit messy in and of itself.
Yeah, because it's a mythology, and if they say, and I do think they should explain part of this whole universe, and that a god created it. But again, it's about rights. What right? We don't know. We don't know what rights they had. Apparently, they bought more rights after what they didn't bought initial all the rights, but then they repurchased other rights, probably while writing scripts and seeing plot holes, like you just said, or feeling they need to explain certain things. I'm okay with some topics still being open. This is like even us as complete nerds of Tolkien, and me. I mean, I read these books so many times, I can't even count. But there are still open questions, obviously. I'm fine with that. And it takes people to the books. And this is what I want. I want this show.
Very true.
This happened to The Witcher. Look, those Witcher books were sold out last year or the year before, when the show came out, right? Because everybody wanted to know more. Game of Thrones, like the Song of Ice and Fire books. People all of a sudden bought all these books because they wanted to know more. And I would love, if due to the show and open questions and who are the Valar, who's Eru, what is the Silmarillion, what is the Silmaril? Open questions, and then people go to the books and explore that, because a lot of people don't even know that there is more than the Hobbit and the three Lord of the Ring books, and it's
And
so
brings
cool.
them to us, hopefully, too, the Tolkien YouTubers, which is pretty
Exactly.
good too.
We try our best to explain. Don't make that many mistakes.
But of course, yeah, I mean, we will make mistakes. I mean, hey, I just I just made a mistake too, and you know what? If I'm going to be completely honest, I said that the willow tree, the old man willow, was an oak one time. Just slipped out of my mouth. There you go. But I mean, yeah, hopefully it will bring people to the Tolkien fandom, not necessarily just the YouTubers, but I mean even subreddits. Hopefully it will build that community, and hopefully build a good community and maintain the good community that we've got.
Yes. I'm afraid of Reddit though. Like people are mean on Reddit and Twitter. So
It's not
like,
it's not as bad as Twitter. Twitter's probably the worst. Reddit can be bad too, but I mean, like I do a podcast. You can go check that out on Fellowship of Fans channel, another YouTuber. There's some good Redditors. There's definitely some bad Redditors. I won't say any names, but there's some bad ones.
they call us out like as if we I think some were saying all of the Lord of the Ring YouTubers literally read from
The
the
wikis, like the One Ring.
I would love to do that, people. Then it wouldn't take me weeks to write a script because that is what it takes me. And if I say a sentence that's very similar, that's because we all talk about the same book. So
Yeah,
give
and
me.
you've got to cross-examine. You've got to compare what the wiki article says to what the YouTuber says to what Tolkien says, because in a lot
Yes.
of cases, if you quote Tolkien, the quote's going to be the same. If you paraphrase him, the paraphrase is probably going to be pretty similar.
Yeah, so don't come at us. No. But yeah, so let's wrap this up. So we have these amazing elven strongholds. We are sure most of them will be portrayed. I would love if at least a little bit of the woodland realm and Orofa and Thranduil will play a role, because actually the fate of Thranduil's dad is so tragic, because what we were talking about before, the problem of the Sindar listening to a Noldor, and what happened at the Battle of the Last Alliance. And if they show that, that will be, because that was not portrayed in the films, the films, that there was no time to portray this problem. But Orofa was a Sindar, and gil-galad, the leader of the whole thing, of the army leader, let's say that, of the Battle of the Last Alliance, was a Noldor. And Orofa didn't want to listen or be commanded by a Noldor. So he stormed, I don't know what day of the battle, but he almost all the woodland realm was slain due to Orofa attacking way earlier than Gil-galad would have wanted them to attack, because
Yeah.
they were positioned, surrounding. I don't really know. I don't really remember it 100%, but it was a mistake by Orofa, because he didn't want to listen and he didn't want to be commanded by an Noldor, and this is why he died, and this is why most of the woodland realm died. Thranduil went home with just a few of his people left.
Yeah, I think it's like more than half died, which is huge, especially considering the amount that went. And I would really like to see that, because the elves weren't perfect. Tolkien
No.
says that sometimes they were in the wrong. And if you look at Feanor, he is probably one of the worst elves. If I think maybe the worst elf, the
Yeah.
single worst elf. There are a couple others like Eol. He was pretty messed up.
Meglin, his son,
Yeah, I'd say Eol is probably more evil, but he did not do as much evil. He was pretty bad, but he didn't cause all the stuff that Feanor did.
No.
But we do need to see elves like Feanor, elves mess up, and not just in pure ways like Celebrimbor, who just wanted, Eregion to prosper. He wanted to save Middle Earth, essentially. We need to see elves that are rash and that make big mistakes, and maybe even some with bad intent.
Yeah, No, I want to see those tragedies. Yes, and in the end, it's all a big, great Greek tragedy. And yeah, I want to see that because, as you said, the elves of the third age, there because it's not their age; it's the age of men, and it's about redemption of men and claiming kingship again of men. This is the story of the third age. The second age, the first age, especially, is the age of the elves. About squabbles, about kinslaying, about good elves, bad elves, family tragedies, Fëanor's family, and all that. So I want to see those elves, like you said, because they are so three-dimensional and so different from the elves you see, especially in the movies. You think they're all pure. This is how you imagine a fairy, right? This is very the fairy tale aspect of the elf you see in the third age and in the movies. They are really good warriors. I mean, Thranduil in The Hobbit, is a bit greedy. um,
Yeah, I'd say they sort of went overboard with
Overboard, yeah.
his depiction of being a little bit of a bad king. Because in The Hobbit, he was a good king,
It was,
um, and of course he didn't really trust the dwarves,
yeah.
but he had reason for
Well,
that
makes
as well,
sense.
like
Yeah.
we discussed earlier a little bit.
Because of the dwarves. No, but yeah, and I really want to see that. I want, as you said, I want to see Galadriel who's not perfect. I want to see a struggling Galadriel. I want to see a Galadriel who can I trust him. Maybe she trusted Anatar in the beginning and was also like, oh wow, cool. He's teaching. I want to see that. I want to see these redemption arcs and all that of elves as well, not just men. And I think we will get that. And that is very exciting to me.
Yeah, particularly with Celebrimbor. And again, he wasn't an evil elf like Eol or Fëanor was, but I mean, he still made mistakes, and in that way, he was young and foolish.
Yeah,
Again, he was pretty old, but he was still
yeah,
not the wisest, not nearly so much as Gil-galad, Elrond, or Galadriel, and that's apparent because what he did, accepting Anatar, sort of led to the downfall of his people.
yeah. But it was meant to be because who is he? He's the last of the line of Fëanor. So it was meant to be him. He was meant to fail because the curse is still upon them, and that family had to die out. Um,
Yeah,
I think
that
that
is
needed
true.
to be. I think that was his fate. He had there. I think there was no escaping his fate because he's from that cursed line, and that line needed to end. This is very often, especially in Greek tragedies, or how Tolkien describes the cities have to fall. Like that's a predestiny in a way.
Yes, although I would say he he still did have some free will, and there was
Yes.
it's a doom. It seriously is a doom, and
Yeah.
in this case, it's just as doom and gloomy as it sounds, even though it's not always. But I mean, there's sort of two sides to every story. So I think there are things he could have done differently.
Oh yeah.
True though, you do raise a really good point though,
Yeah.
because his family was cursed.
Yeah.
Um,
And he's the
yeah,
last in the line. He was the last alive.
and the second greatest craftsman ever to live.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, in some forms of canon, of course. I think in another in the Unfinished Tales, it's Enertil, probably
Yes.
butchering the pronunciation,
Yeah.
who also made the Lesser in
Yes.
yet again one form of canon.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Good. That was very exciting. Do you have like last words? What are your last words, Galvin, before the tragedy ends? What are you?
Uh, I don't
What?
know. I'm looking forward to the TV show. It's been a great discussion. Always love talking more about Tolkien, Lord of the Rings. It's been a
Yes.
blast. And audience, check out my YouTube channel. Will be in the description. Again, I discuss Tolkien lore and some Tolkien news as well.
He does, and I really like your approach on things because you're not just there for the show. You have a lot of knowledge about the law. Don't undersell yourself. And I had a blast discussing this. You're always welcome. And as I always say, I love to have different voices here. Hopefully soon I'll have a few female voices. I found some people because I'm doing the boys. We have like a group chat and we all chat with each other very way too often. And I always say, "Where are the girls? Bring girls." I'm literally always the only one, but we have a few girls now. I'm very excited about that.
Yeah,
Uh,
we've got two others now, Nerd Cookies and Alfwine, a name from the Book of Lost Tales, I believe.
yes, Elfwine Road. Yeah, and yeah, as I said, we're all friends, and it is a cool. I call us the Fellowship 2.0, and yeah, you're always welcome. There will be more show news coming and more topics I think we can talk about in the future where you'll be way more knowledgeable, sorry, than I am. But yeah.
And with any luck, Tolkien Reading Day will not only bring a fantastic playlist, but also maybe a trailer or maybe just a small tweet
You
about
reckon
the
a
show.
trailer? No. You reckon a trailer?
It's, I don't know. I mean, well, we do know from Shippy and a couple of other sources that
Yeah.
their strategy and just plain common sense is to sort of hold off on the news as much as possible and then release it all at once. And Tolkien Reading Day is a pretty big holiday. They mentioned something about it last year. It wasn't too big. It was just something about the appendices. Which one should they read? Sort of hinting that they bought them, although they might have already leaked that they've got those as
Mm-hmm.
a source. But yeah, hopefully we'll get something. Probably not a trailer, but that's probably the best thing that we could get. If not, maybe some casting.
Yes, I would like behind the scenes. Do you remember what they did with The Witcher? They showed images of production, of sets, that kind of stuff. I'd be happy with that. So you just get an idea of, oh wow, this is the world of Middle Earth.
Yeah.
Something I always like, it's kind of my living. I was a TV producer for a long time, and that's what we did to tease when we didn't have a story yet to tell. So you show behind the scenes footage. So that would be kind of cool, but I don't know if it's too early. But I mean, they have a lot of footage already. So yeah, let's see. But I mean,
Eh,
Tolkien Society is not really involved in the filming, so
yeah. With any luck, though, the show will come out late this year. I get a ton of
no,
comments about that,
no,
almost as much as I do about controversial issues.
no.
Um,
Yeah, April.
but
I think they'll get the Game of Thrones sport
yeah,
with HBO, but I think April-ish next year. They will have so much post-production. But you know how long
it is a lot.
post-production takes for a series? It's not a cinematic movie, it's a series on a level, on a scale. So much green screen stuff. I mean, they'll have the best technique available right now. I think post production will take a lot.
Yeah, I think they've already got the first two completely filmed. I'm
Yes.
not sure if they're entirely done
Yeah.
being edited and produced and stuff
Yeah.
like that, but
Yeah.
hopefully with the leaving of Thomas Budge, they don't have to reshoot anything.
I don't think so. I think he had like a minor role and just wanted to
That's good.
get out the word. What do you?
The way I read it was, I mean, he's probably not a super big character. I really don't know how the deals work with, if you're a main character, what happens if you leave, what the legally binding contract is. But he probably isn't a main character, and I would prefer that they delay the show if they need to, because of course you don't just want Celebrimbor to die after season 2 just
No,
randomly. He can't just be disappearing.
no.
CGI would look weird.
Yep, we're like
So I
bring
think,
Leia back.
yeah. Oh, so yeah, there's a lot of things they could do, and with
Yeah.
any luck, it will probably come out like December of this year. But you're probably right. Early next year is more likely.
Yeah. And as you said, I rather want it to be right and perfect, and I'm okay with waiting a little bit more on.
Absolutely.
But I think we agree on we're hopeful they can do a lot with what is there. And I'll be happy with anything, I guess, about Middle Earth. So I'm still, I still want to be cast as somebody very tiny. I'm okay with anything. I would say an orc, tiny orc.
Who wouldn't? I would. I would be an orc. I would be anything.
Yeah. I just want to tell my children one day, Mom was a tiny orc on the set of Lord of the Rings. Let's see. Cool. So thank you again. I'll link everything here. Drop the video soon. It was a blast. Come back soon and we'll talk more show news then.
All right. Sounds good.
Bye bye, my lovelies. Please subscribe. Otherwise, what are you doing?